thank you, Dr. John Deloney, for coming on the Champion Hope podcast today. Super honored and humbled. Our roots go back to, man, as early as 1999, but my earliest memory of you, I think it was that freshman week at Lubbock Christian University, and you did the backpack talk of luggage and things, and just leave your luggage behind, leave your stuff behind.
I did that?
Yeah. That was your very first 1999.
I have no recollection of that at all.
So
that's funny because I still give that talk now, and I thought I just rewrote it and made it all new. I thought I wrote it just a year ago. Turns out I'm just recycling 20-year-old material. That's embarrassing.
Nothing new under the sun, right?
Wow, not even in my own. Hey, if that's the memory you have, that's good. There's some other people that would say, "Hey, man, my memories of you aren't super great for podcasts," so that's good.
You've recently wrote a book. You've recently joined Dave Ramsey in the Entree Leadership, and his whole host of brands. And so, congrats on that journey. I want to dive into some of your journey, but first, I just want to give a shout out to your Instagram post this morning, and maybe we can talk about it for a few minutes. Specifically, I just started laughing that the processed foods and the artificial preservatives and colors that we add into all the stuff are barely more nutritious than the cheapest dog food.
That's probably. I probably am not being honest there, but the dog food's healthier, right? At least the dog food came from an animal at some point. I mean, or a plant.
So while we're on it for a moment, you're a huge mental health advocate. Anxiety is probably your niche per se, or that's what you're branded by. How is our current state of food and nutrition impacting our life?
I think if there's a couple of things here. One, there is a lot of hoopla, and I get caught up in the hoopla. I used to have spreadsheets, dude, they're embarrassing. Like I was like a beautiful mind, like just bonkers. I had spreadsheets of fad diets I would try for 30 days, and I got my own glucose, all the stuff. And I don't have diabetes or anything. I just want to know, like, what are these actually doing to my body? And then now, as we've gotten into some more wearables and stuff like that, I got this all kind of gadgets. I want to find out what this stuff's actually doing to me. The reality is, so much of it we don't know. I really don't know. And there's some of the studies are just so garbage. And now we're in a world where the manufacturers are just hiring their own scientists to do their own studies, and that way they own the results and they can shelve the negative ones and only put out the positive ones. And some of the positive ones it's just bad science. But at the end of the day, I know this to be true. We're eating way more often and way more manufactured, not real food. And we are mainlining sugar, and we are mainlining just just like I was gonna say smorgasbord. That makes me sound like an idiot. We're mainlining a whole bunch of chemicals that didn't exist 50 years ago or 100 years ago, that we may not have the double-blind study to prove X, Y, and Z. But we all know that our bodies are designed to ingest this stuff. And so I think we're just playing whack-a-mole with our physiology. And now the research is super clear. There's not really mental health or physical health. Those were academic bifurcations. There's really just health. And when you push one domino, man, we're all wired differently. We're all from different places, our ancestors, and we all have different genetic makeup, man. And when you push those dominoes, you just don't know where they're going to fall.
Yeah.
And I just eating real food and slowing down, eating less food, and being cognizant about what we're putting in our bodies. We've just sold that out.
Yeah. That's the theme for our month in my mastermind that I host. And yesterday with the guys, I had them rank themselves 1 to 5 in 5 different areas. Sleep, stress, nutrition. Because I'm going to leave this topic. What are 3 things that you've done today to kind of combat the decisions you're making to live a wholehearted life, to live, I don't want to say carefree, but what are nutritious decisions you've made actually today on this day?
Let's see. This morning, I look at you take one step after the other every day, and your days become weeks and your weeks become months, right?
Yep.
And so you can make some tiny little decisions every day. The other side of that is those decisions become a piece of a larger ecosystem. So I looked at today was reflective of what yesterday looked like, and what was reflective of last Wednesday. I did a talk here for a mortgage company, a giant mortgage company here in Nashville. And then I jumped on a plane and flew to Houston to do an event that night in Houston. The next morning at 5, we were up on a plane to fly back. And then I had 2 days worth of shows. And I got back on a plane and went to Lubbock to do an event that was 4 talks in 24 hours. And then landed back, landed back to a Monday night. And then, Tuesday we were on it. So now I'm waking up Wednesday. I don't know when this thing comes out, but I'm waking up Wednesday. So I was usually I don't eat breakfast, or if I do, it's a real high fat breakfast, and that just gets me through. And so today, though, I did sit down and have breakfast full of collagen and berries and some obnoxious, some yogurt from goats that slept in the beds of nuns somewhere on the other side of the, yeah. And then for lunch, I had a high protein, high fat lunch with no grains or any of that kind of garbage. And so it's being intentional about where I'm at today. And so I know today I'm going to be dragging. I didn't sleep as well as I wanted to last night. And so I'm going to be intentional about my nutrition. So now once you make some life changes, it says I'm going to kick sugar out of my life. I'm going to kick grains out of my life. Then I can begin to dial it in. Today, I'm going to need a little bit more, and I'm not going to feel bad about, I don't eat breakfast. Well, that's dumb. If you need breakfast, eat breakfast, right? Or I don't ever eat. Well, don't be like that, right? But sometimes you got to swipe the whole desk clean before you start putting stuff back on it. And then last night, being intentional about sleep, we went to bed. My wife was laughing like, man, we are such losers. I think the lights were off at like 9:20 last night. We just went to bed early. And then this morning I skipped the gym, and it was raining outside, and I live on on 7 acres out here in the woods. And it was a meditative morning. So I went and sat on my front porch with my coffee, and I literally just breathed for an hour. And I didn't work out and lift. And I'm a big proponent of lifting and working out. That's a big part of my day. And it wasn't today. So some of it's just dialing in on where you are today. When you live, what's your whole picture of health look like? Those are 3 things there.
Man.
And it sounds, hey, this is going to sound stupid. It's harder for me on most days to not work out. It's hard for me to rest. And so some people, I've got people in my life who I love. It's really hard for them to get to the gym. That's not for me. It's the other way. Like today was a day I just needed to rest, and you just got to listen to your body.
Yeah. But I mean, the key you're talking about is anticipating, being able to anticipate.
Intentional, yeah.
But also the key that you're talking about is that the habits that you've built over time allow you to get back on track. I think a lot of times people get overwhelmed by even starting any type of goal, much less a health goal, because they get overwhelmed by the entire journey versus just looking at like today. And you're aware enough of like, okay, I'm anticipating all my travel schedules, but I need to get back on track.
Yeah. Or like when I land, my team here makes fun of me when we land in a new town. And again, this sounds so diva and cheesy. It's embarrassing to say this, but it's being honest. When we land, the first thing I do is go to the gym. I need 45 minutes or an hour to just blow all that travel out. I'm always late. 100% of the time I'm late to the airport and sitting around and waiting and flying. I hate flying. So that's just me hitting Control Alt Delete on that day. And then we go to whatever event we're there to do. But I build that time into my schedule and I know I need it. Right.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, my wife and I just bought a Vitamix travel carrying case because we're like religious about our smoothies. Awesome. We're just religious about it. So
I think it comes down to intentionality. Like I could have been surprised that I was tired when I woke up on Wednesday. I knew last Monday that this upcoming Wednesday I was going to be tired. I could just look at my travel schedule, and I can be in service of that, or I can get on top of it and be intentional about going to bed, be intentional about community time, and be intentional about what I'm putting in my body. And I can either pretend like, oh, I didn't know. I knew.
Yeah. Well, we'll probably come back to this theme in a moment. So I want to go on your journey for just a brief second, because I know let's use Andrew Peterson's Songs of Home and some of his language, but you serving in the mental health capacity in the field that you're in, a lot of people look at you today and you're like, man, I could never be John Deloney who goes outside and stands in the grass with my shoes off and sit for 10 minutes and breathe and read my Bible, like whatever, right? Get outside and deadlift, 350 pounds, whatever you're doing these days.
Maybe 25 pounds.
But, like a lot of people kind of see where you're at today and don't really know that journey away from home.
Mm.
So kind of, would you take us on that journey of your evolution of growth and the valleys and mountains that would be relevant, for our time today?
Yeah, I think I'd go back maybe 2 or 3 seeds that are bearing fruit now, 20, 30 years later, is some parents. I grew up and they weren't perfect. Dad was a homicide detective and a SWAT guy. My mom wasn't allowed to go to college. That was just the culture she grew up in. And so her first community college class was at 42. She finally got the courage just to buck the system. And she took a class and then another class, the next semester, another class. And then my dad was a SWAT guy, homicide detective. He was a stud in the city of Houston, saw some wild stuff. And then over a weekend, took a job in ministry at a large church in Houston. And then over time, my mom went from a stay-at-home mom. She worked in the craft room at a local church to she graduated at 57 with her PhD and then became tenured as a professor at 63, and she's 71 now. She just stopped being the department chair this year.
Wow.
She wouldn't get on a plane before, and now she was flying and teaching at Oxford and Wales, all over the world. So I grew up with parents who not only talked. A lot of parents say, just follow your dreams, do whatever, do what's. My parents just did the next thing that made the most sense and the next craziest thing. So I had a model for that, I had a picture for that. The second thing is I was raised in a culture of curiosity, less judgment and a lot of curiosity. So, man, if you don't know something, go figure it out and go to the library. My mom took me to the library every week when I was a kid. We read like crazy as kids. And then as we got older, it was always, well, let's just go figure it out. And then most of my career has been at colleges, and man, I don't know much of anything, Lance, but you know what's cool is I got a lot of buddies. Like that dude's got a degree in physiology. When COVID kicked off, this was cool. I don't know anything about epidemiology, but I got a friend who's a cancer biologist. She knows way more than me. And so I don't even have to, I've never had to Google anything. I just asked my buddy who's the dean of a pharmacy school. So grew up with, have some people in your life that you can go to ask hard questions. And so this idea of being curious, and I think a lot of folks get locked down in judgment, and I'm having mental health challenges. What's going on? I'm struggling. I don't sleep well. For me, the default setting was curiosity. Let's see if we can go figure this out. And then the third thing was I did grow up with I had some really remarkable friends and coaches who poured into my life. Moving my body has been a part of my life since I was a teeny tiny little kid. I think I have a ADHD tattooed on my forehead, right? So, I mean, I'm a card carrying member, and instead of some of the more modern pharmaceutical approaches, I had some people encourage different things growing up. And so that's paid dividends as I've gotten older.
Yeah.
So some of those habits are just instilled here. But as I faced my own mental health crisis, I tried to accomplish and achieve love and accomplish and achieve worth through job titles and through salary numbers and through any number of things. When I was trying to just get to the finish line instead of running the race, you cut corners. I exaggerate. I'd make stuff up. Because the goal is just to get to the finish line there. And then what I've come to realize over the last 20 years of coaching and counseling folks and dealing with people in the worst of moments, man, none of that stuff matters. It just doesn't. And I know it sounds so cliche and cheesy, and my 18-year-old self would laugh at me, but it just doesn't. And so then when I found myself not well, I was working at a university, and so I just took a counseling class, and I took another one, and took another one, and ended up with another degree. That was never the goal. The goal was just to figure out what in the world's going on, and then just kind of went down a rabbit hole there.
Interesting. So you kind of ran into yourself because you took one counseling class.
Well, I knew I was real close to burning it all down.
Okay.
I got to a point when I was over so much stuff at the university, one of the universities I was working at. I had so many people working for me, so many departments. I could have not gone to work for a week or two. And if I just answered my cell phone, no one would have even asked where I was, because I was just everywhere. And then I was in hospitals 3 or 4 nights out of the week with students, or, out
Mm.
drunk students, or sick students, or students who passed away. I mean, just mess. And then you're dealing with crisis and trauma, and then you're leading your own staff. And so you got to deal with their hearts and minds and dreams and wishes and hopes and fears and all that. And then we hadn't been able to have kids for several years. And then suddenly we had a little boy, and my wife was a professor, and we didn't, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. And we lived in grief for so long. And then suddenly you got a kid and you're excited,
Mhm.
but it's weird. And, yeah, my brain just said enough,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it manifested. I had been on an MMA team for several years, and we practiced from 8 to 10 at night. And so I'd get home all wired up, and then somebody handed me this magic pill called Ambien that would just knock you out. And suddenly 5 or 6 years later, um, I can't I can't get in bed without it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so you're not sleeping, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And then one day I just got up and didn't tell anyone where I was going, and I drove to see a buddy who's a medical doctor, and I said, "Brother, I'm not okay." And that started a long journey back, spiritually, physically, emotionally, relationally, everywhere. And
Yeah,
it's been a rebuild ever since.
yeah. Would you say it sounds like most of that's probably the decade of the 30s? I mean, for the age bracket.
Yeah,
For that one.
26 to when I was in 26 is when I got my first higher ed job, when I was over my head.
Yeah,
When I was leading things that I didn't have the wisdom for.
yeah,
Right, 26-year-old kid dealing with really complex sexual assault cases and tragedy. I mean, those are tough, and I
yeah,
had some extraordinary mentors that walked alongside me during those things. But that was when it started. And then I had a ringside seat to watch an executive implode, and I learned, whoa, don't do those things, and don't. So but that was the precursor, the on ramp to my 30s,
yeah,
which was trying to do it all, and
yeah,
not sacrifice anything.
yeah. But what I want everyone to hear, and you probably have seen this to be true in your work, is that your story, right? That the context of it may be different, but the truth is that we all are on this path, and we're all going to run up against ourselves, and we're all going to have a decision to make. Am I going to walk in truth and grace and try to figure this out? Or as some would say, typically around the age of 36, we hit this wall, and we can try to learn the lesson that God is trying to teach us. Or what happens most frequently, especially in men's lives, is that we don't learn the lesson, and we continue the cycle over and over and over, right? Build the business, it crashes. Build the business. I'm a millionaire, it crashes. Build the business, it crashes. So if you're going to kind of reorient somebody that's listening to this, like, right, they're standing at that wall, and they know the decision to make, and they know the journey back home is the journey that they need to make. How would you try to help someone reorient their lives to make that journey back home, right? That Ambien moment. Possibly they don't have all the friends that you have to call, but how do you kind of guide someone through to just very pragmatic way of pointing them back home?
I think the first thing is to recognize all of it's hard, and the choice is not a difficult journey or an easy journey. The choice is choose your hard. It is hard being 75 pounds overweight, and your knees don't work, and you can't get out of bed, and you don't feel like being intimate with your wife, and she doesn't feel like you being around, and you're grumpy, and you're just watching video games or playing video games, watch TV. That's hard life. And it feels simple. It's not. It's miserable. And getting up every single morning and working out is hard. And so the choice is you got to choose your hard. And when I recognize there's not an easy road, there's not, even taking your foot off the gas, you get hit from behind, right? You're going to get hit. And so choose your hard. The second one is you can't do this by yourself, and you got to have other men in your life. And so I think back to when I made the decision to get in my car and drive and go see a doctor. The part of that story I don't always tell was a year before that, a buddy of mine who was some fancy pants lawyer, we just started lifting weights together at 5 in the morning. And we did that for a year. And I didn't think about it, but I just knew if I skipped, he'd be there. And so I kept going and kept going and kept going. And I used to think it was the physical benefits and the discipline benefits. Some of that's true, but really it was the accountability. And we talked about everything from marriage to kids to frustration to work to complaining to cheering each other on. And that was part of it. And then I had another guy who's a spiritual mentor, and the three of us met for Mexican food every Tuesday for a year. And we talked about scary things. I didn't know how to tell a couple of guys, dude, I'm really scared about this. And that's when the economy had collapsed, and there was a lot of uncertainty in the university world because you couldn't borrow money. I mean, it was a mess. And watching somebody who was a really remarkable and well respected leader say, man, I'm really scared. I don't know. That didn't freak me out. That gave me a model for, oh, that's what courage looks like. That's what confidence looks like. Going into a situation with bullets flying everywhere and not feeling nervous, not feeling scared, not feeling apprehensive, that's insanity. That's not courageous. Courageous is feeling, dude, like I might get shot and then I'm going in anyway, right? So it's learning what those things feel like. And then it was about having people in your life and making hard decisions. And the hard decisions are not, sometimes I'm going to quit my job, or I need to, reimagine my marriage.
Right.
Often the hardest choices are, I got to put my running shoes on right now. I got to put the donut down. I got to go lift. I got to not respond to this email until tomorrow because I'm pissed off right now. I've got to, if I look at my wife right now, I'm going to rage out, and I still have to tell her, I'm sorry for what I just said. I still got to go help with the dishes because it's the right thing. I'm going to make dinner. So it's these things that feel so insurmountable. And man, you begin to practice those little things, and it's remarkable. You look up and it's 7 years later and everything around you is different.
Yeah. Man, thank you for that. That is super helpful.
I think we over sensationalize and often over spiritualize the journey. It's
absolutely.
It's about get a carrot, man, not a beer, and or stop at one beer and do it once a week instead of once every 30 minutes when you get up. It's sitting down, and when you say, man, I need a drink or I need to grab some Skittles, just stop for a second and go, why? What am I hiding from? Right. So it's these little bitty moments. It's not often these big grandiose Hollywood moments.
I mean, our comfort and complacency is literally killing us. And the passive lifestyle, from the outside looking in, it's like, oh man, that must be nice to do whatever they're doing, right? But the comfort is like a perfect example. So I'm on like day 14 of the 75 hard challenge right now.
Okay, there you
go. So super mindful things are happening. Like this morning, the girls are having their toast, doing our deal. I got some new pumpkin butter yesterday from Trader Joe's, and I'm like about to put that spoon back in the sink, and I like look at it and I'm like, man, I would used to like just lick that sucker, right? No big deal. Like I'm super healthy, but in the scheme of things, it's like trying to take your mental awareness and your heart awareness to another level, because all these little things, make a huge difference over time.
And here's where I've gotten received a lot of grace for myself, and it's actually made me breathe deeper. And one of my goals is to pass this along. With those moments right there, like I'm about to just lick this spoon, and I committed to something that said I wasn't going to. We often moralize that or turn that into a character issue. Yeah. And getting into neuroscience the last 5 or 6 years has been really helpful for me, in that our brains are designed to offload as much as possible, to go to default to routine as much as possible. And so instead of judging yourself when you're about to put that in your mouth and go, man, you slob, you're so unintentional, you never, just think, you can pause and go, my brain offloaded that one. Yeah. I need to be intentional about it. And it's honoring this wild brain that's trying to take in all these sounds and smells and colors and everything and process it all at once, and know, I do have control over my thoughts. I do have control over my default settings. I just got to even know I have default settings. Oh. And that's the same thing with rage. It's the same thing with getting like yelling at somebody or getting angry or skipping all that stuff is. And if you can just be curious and not beat yourself up over it, then you can begin to just change the dial on your brain a little bit, man. And it will catch up in no time.
And what you're talking about is that perfection sets in, that shame sets in for people that aren't aware to that level, for sure. Are you good if I ask you a couple of coaching questions?
Dude, dig into anything, man. I'm wide open.
All right. What is John working on right now that you're just kind of hitting the wall, right? It may not be a real wall, but it's like, what are you working on that's meaningful, that you're trying to pursue, that maybe it's a challenge right now?
I would say the two biggest things that I'm wrestling with is, um, uh, if you had said, what is my superpower? I would have given you two. One superpower is my ability to detach from a situation. So that comes from years of crisis work. So you can see blood and guts and brains, and there's, I don't know how to describe it other than there's just a shift that you can make and back out of it. So you can be present, be with somebody, and not be overwhelmed by it. The second one is sleep. I've become pathological about sleep. My friends have made fun of me for years about going to bed at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock or leaving the party just to go to bed. And like, for years they had their feelings hurt by it. And I would just tell them, dude, tomorrow's will be more fun if I could sleep. And then they've got, as these wearables have gotten more and more precise, I've realized I am terrible at sleep. So I'm in bed a long time, but I'm terrible at it. And as I've pulled the string on that and all the way back to childhood trauma, one of the reasons that dealing with childhood traumas and dealing with ongoing traumas and cumulative traumas is, I think I've been in fight or flight for 40 years. And when you're fleeing for 40 years, I see a pattern in my life of chaos and of crap everywhere, and I'm always late to everything. So the last year or so for me in this media ecosystem, the more books you sell and the more radio shows you're on and the more talks you do, the more books you sell and the more books you got to write and the more talks. So it's a machine, and it's a beast that you can never feed. Oh. And for a guy who's always just sliding into home, like my boss didn't like to travel with me in higher ed because I was almost always late to the flights. And you can't do that when someone's paying you tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars to come lead their event for their you can't miss that flight. You just can't. So and my family's got a plan, and I've got an 11-year-old who's looking a lot like his old man, and it's making me like, oh no, I gave him that. So some of it has been the reverse engineering all the way back to finally dealing with 7 and 9-year-old John. And some of that is dealing with what I think is the character issue of be on time, and it's disrespectful to other people. And what is the neurology in between those things? What's the psychology and spirituality between those things? So that's number one, is dealing with some stuff I just haven't dealt with in a long time. And the second thing is the trap in this particular job is always here's the way I phrase it. A biology professor can go into sophomore year in college and ask their students, hey, what do you want to learn? What are you guys interested in? Biology. And they can say dinosaurs, they can say plants. Say, great, I'm going to teach you all about dinosaurs and plants. And you can have a great class. You get great teacher evals. The students would love it. They'd learn some stuff about chlorophyll and about, the Jurassic age or whatever. And they would fail the med school exam because you didn't teach them what they needed to know. And so we're in this media ecosystem right now. We're really in this education system where the world's just designed itself in the last 5 years just to tell us what we already know and what we already believe and what we already think we want to know. Yeah. And so there is no pressure to hear news that we don't want to hear. There's no pressure to hear news that is uncomfortable for us. Mm-hmm. And so I just know if I want this, I'll go to Fox. And if I want that, I'll go CNN. If I want that, I'll go to ABC. And Instagram just sends me anything that I already think it knows me better than I do. And Facebook just tells me what I want to hear. And so for me, it is, how do you balance trying to have a job? Like, you want people to read your stuff. And at the same time, so much stuff in the mental health space out here is trash. It's just garbage. It's nonsense. And how do you tell people, hey, here's what you really need to hear in a way that they'll actually want to hear it? Right. That's become the hard part for me. And I'm just used to captive grad students for the last 15 years that they got to sit in my class and we can walk through what you got to learn. And so it's trying not to be tempted by. So where that rubber meets the road there, I may get after somebody on one of my shows. They call in and say, I'm cheating on my wife and blah, and I may let them have it. Well, if that video does really good, I got somebody who works here that will tell me that video did great. And the temptation for me is to yell at every caller. Make sport of every caller. Right. And so that may not be what every caller needs. And so it's staying in this moment, even if it's going to cost you views and likes, and those are real dollars too nowadays. stay and play a long game. Like the long game is integrity, and the long game is be true to yourself. And the long game is if this whole thing goes away, I'm still a good dad and I'm still a good husband, and we'll figure out what's next is next. Right. That's a tough season.
Yeah, absolutely. So playing the long game and then going back to the question that you're asking yourself. I mean, it's a common question I'll ask, and people that do counseling, coaching kind of know that origin story. So what are you learning about yourself when you ask yourself that 6, 7, 8 years old John about one, either possibly my presence doesn't matter, or I'm dishonoring myself, or I'm dishonoring other people. So what are you actually learning from going back that is relevant to John today?
I'll be really honest, and you can just edit this out if it's not a good fit for the show. Okay. What I didn't realize I was carrying, the narrative that I grew up with was this: John, there's a cosmic God who likes you. He loves you. But you said that bad word, or you saw that Playboy under that one guy's bed that lives down the street, and I had to kill my kid because of you. And now I'm watching you. And if you screw up, I will torture and maim and burn you for all of eternity, because that's what you get. And if I was to take God out of that equation and put a neighborhood father in that equation, that's trauma. That's abusive. And what I didn't realize is how much that translated to every other relationship. So I found myself doing whatever I possibly could to either escape relationships or be whoever that person in front of me needed me to be so that they would like me. And that's an exhausting, rudderless way to live. And so then you wake up and you're 30 or you're 40 and you're looking at your little kid and they can tell that you have no anchor. You don't know who you are. Because I've been playing a game. I've been running for 30, 40 years. And that's not to mention, whatever real life trauma happens as a kid. So it's going back and writing letters to my 6-year-old self saying, hey, you're a good kid. And you did stupid stuff when you were 9, and you were 9, right? Or you were 18 and you're an idiot. And you were 28, you were 35, and you shouldn't have said this like this, or this joke wasn't funny. And there's a period at the end of that sentence that happened. And the question the world needs now is not you to whine and complain and try to go edit something you can't edit. It happened. The world's now asking, what sentence are you going to write next? And so it is really almost this weird reverse engineering, just going back and letting past Johns finally sleep, finally rest. And some of it's been intentional with some intentional letter writing. Some of it is being intentional about when my body starts to react to things and like, where does that come from? And that's just being curious, right? I love the physiology of trauma. It's been fascinating to experience it in real time. But it's being highly intentional. And some of that, man, is going through some old memories that I did not want to deal with. You got to, right? You got to dig the infection out.
So how does this apply to John when he goes on the next trip with the Dave Ramsey team, whatever you're up to, and you're realizing I've got to show up with my whole heart. Character matters. My presence matters because I need to honor them. Like, what's that narrative? Like, what's that kind of summary that you're kind of trying to play out right now that kind of helps you shift a new narrative?
It's two things. One, there's an old Bobby Knight quote that everybody wants, and I'm going to butcher it, but everybody wants to be the champion on game day. But that's not where champions are made. And they're made in the practice room a year in advance, right? So a lot of making sure my head is on right and I'm in optimum shape to deal with my thoughts and with my actions is making sure my nutrition's right and my sleep is right and my marriage is right and my relationship with my kids is right. And so all that stuff happens way upstream. And then when you land in a new town with a group of people and you get off the jet and you head up to the thing, I'm in a good mental space. I'm in a good physical space. The idea that I'm going to fall off some wagon is not even real because I've done the prep work. It's when you land somewhere in a new city and you're exhausted and you're baked and you're fried and you got to play some sort of role. man, that's when you're in danger of slipping and falling and getting hurt, right? Making bad decisions. And then the second thing is I don't fully have my head wrapped around this idea of what a brand is. Somebody here said it best. A brand is who you are, what people think of you when you're not in the room. And I do like that. But the idea of constructing an artificial brand and trying to live into that is insane to me. Yeah, I don't know how you can't keep that up. And so the beauty of the organic nature of the way this thing started with me is like the brand is just, that's how that dude is. You know what I mean? For good or for bad. And when I took this job, me and my wife talked about it. I'm just going to be as authentic as I can. And if it doesn't work, I'll have to look in the mirror and say, they didn't like me. And I'll have to be okay with that, because the other side of that is playing a role in constructing some nonsense that at some point falls down. If you're not truly congruent, at some point that implodes, or worse, you pass it to your kids and they got to deal with that. And so those are the two things, man. You get way upstream. And then, man, I did an event the other night. There was 1,400 people there. And I told them out the gate, I'm as nervous as I've ever been, because it was a homecoming event. I mean, it was just a weird event. So just being honest and not trying to play something that you're not. And people will go with honesty 99% of the time.
Congruency, integrity, an authentic heart goes a long way.
It's a lot less exhausting, right?
Oh yeah. But our culture is very pretentious, right? Whether it's church, whether it's organizations like Instagram, like, right. We've set up our lives to be something that it's totally not. And I think COVID has exposed that. People are now having to run into themselves and begin to ask all these questions that we've talked about today.
Mirror's tough, man.
Yeah.
Mirror's tough.
Say thank you for your time. I mean, the brand thing, we could chase that for a whole nother while, because I mean, prior to this, you weren't really on social media. And one day
I had zero, dude. I never, it didn't exist. I just thought it was stupid.
John Deloney, 200 followers. Where's he been? Is he in Hollywood, or what is he up to these days? And the next thing,
that's where I left. Yeah. When you and I left, that's where I was headed. Yeah. It's a weird ecosystem. And so the question for me is, how do you use something that I know both the research tells me, my personal experience tells me, I've been watching students implode, young people and their families for years. Whew, man, how do you wade into that and be a steward of it and not let it take over? And it's been tough, man. That social media is a demon, dude. That stuff's tough. And not in like the spooky, like Bible demons, but like that sucker will get your soul, man. And it's tough. And at the same time, I don't know 50,000 people. I don't know 1 million people. I like hang out with the same 5 guys I've hung out with. I was in Lubbock, Texas this past weekend, and I hung out with the same dudes I was in college with. We just sat on somebody's back porch. And so it's a great vehicle to connect, but it's not real connection. So it's a great vehicle to trade information. And when I begin to think that it's connection, that's when I'm wrong, because it's not. When I use it for a way to be clever or trade information or to pass along funny jokes, then it's fun.
The story you were sharing before, about the Bobby Knight quote, I often say, champions on the outside are built with hope on the inside. That's kind of my mantra per se. So thank you kind of for speaking into that. I don't know if that was part of your plan, but
no, here's the thing. One of the most important spiritual mentors in my life, his name's Randy Harris, and he spent the year with me in a hard season for me. But one of the things he passed along that I continue to repeat to this day is, so often sarcasm and pessimism present themselves as wisdom, and optimism and hope look foolish. It looks stupid. And so when people come in and you ask them like, hey, how's your weekend? And they just say, would you see what's going on overseas and the tweets, and you see all the stuff, and it's all coming down, and we should like sell everything and put in Bitcoin because it's all falling down. You just think that guy's smarter than everybody else. And then when somebody else comes in and she's like, oh man, my kids are healthy, and my husband and I went and hung out, and the air conditioner works. I mean, things are good. Sun came up. I just automatically think she's naive and dumb. And that's not truth. That is just the ethos of our time. And so Martin Seligman, I think, has the most important psychological finding in the last 100 years, which is pessimism is a choice. Optimism is a learned behavior. I can choose to learn how to be hopeful. And that sounds like a strange thing. It's the same as you can learn desire in your marriage. You can learn to find somebody attractive if that's a choice you make. And those type of that flies directly in the face of the world we live in now. And so, I think there's a powerful need to search and find hope, because we will find what we're looking for.
I want to honor your time, but we're on another thread of that, trying to flip the switch that hope is a choice and hope is the strategy. We often think that hope is this passive thing, but going back to an earlier part of our conversation is that hope is sitting on the couch and you're down in the next beer or having your second glass of whiskey and you're like, something's got to change. And I'm putting on my sneakers out tomorrow morning. I'm setting my shorts out and I'm going to do something. Right? Hope is orienting to your life towards what you want and starting to pursue that.
And hope is it has a mystical quality to it, and it shouldn't. Hope is, if I do this, take this next step, it will get me from here to there, right? That's hope. And then you take that step and you take the next step, you take the next step. And hope is also, was Amos Tversky says, pessimism is stupid because if it happens, you experience it twice, once when you thought about it, once when it came true. Like, what a waste of a way to live. I'm going to hope that the things are going to turn out right. And I'm going to do my part in just leaning that way. Right. And I might break my ankle training for a marathon, or I might try to plan a great romantic weekend for my wife that's a complete bust, or I might try to hug my kid. And the other morning, Lance, my daughter was had woke up early and she was coloring. It was like 5:30 or 6 in the morning, and I was just walking by to head out the door, and I kissed her on the head and said, "Good morning, baby, I love you." And she just shook her hair and she says, "I wish you never existed." I was like, "That's a lot. You're 5. What are you doing?" And then she replied with, "All you ever do is try to kiss me and hug me." What did she say? She said, "All you ever do is try to kiss me and hug me and tell me that you love me. I'm so over it. I can't live like this." She's 5. And I looked at my wife, like, I didn't teach me that in grad school. I don't know what to say here, right? So hope isn't naive and stupid. People are going to be mean to you. The guy's going to cut you off. My buddy died the other day. I'm heading to a funeral. My aunt died yesterday. So hope isn't naive. It is that the sun's going to come out tomorrow and I have a decision to make, and I can walk this way or I can walk that way. And that's that simple.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. We'll link to all the different channels that you're on.
Well, man, thanks for what you're doing. You're putting out goodness in the world, man.